We got a 04 Honda Accord 2.4. It's got a battery light on. That's usually a fault with the alternator, but let's do some checks before we start throwing parts at it. Alright, when I pulled the vehicle in, I made sure that the battery light came on when you just turn the key on, and then when you start it, the battery light stays on, where when it's operating normally it should shut off. So I did verify that. We'll do some quick checks. We'll check the voltage on the battery, and we'll check the voltages here at the alternator. And also, while we're under here, you want to make sure your alternator belt looks good, or actually this is the whole drive belt, but the belt hasn't come off or anything. And then I will start it and we'll verify that the pulley's moving correctly. Although, if it's seized, you should probably hear a bunch of squealing and stuff. But we'll check those things out and go from there. Alright, we'll just see what the battery voltage is on this battery. And we got 12.4 right on the battery itself, and then on the posts and cables, I like to check the cables too. We got the same, so we know that it's not a bad connection in between the post and the connections there. So that looks good. Okay, looking directly at the alternator here, if you didn't know, this is your alternator. This under here, that goes straight to your battery post. So we need to make sure we got 12 volts there, and we'll also do a voltage drop test on the case, which is grounded, and on this, and make sure we don't have any voltage difference between here and the battery. And right here, this black with yellow wire up in the top corner right here, which you see I have back probed, that's going to be our 12 volts when we turn the key on. So once we turn the ignition key on, we should have 12 volts on this wire right here. The other three are wires that go back to the computer. So those are signal wires. Alright, so real quick, we'll just go from battery negative right to the large post down here, and you can see we got battery voltage right there at 12.4. Now we'll go battery positive to the case, and you can see we have 12.4, so we know we're good there too. And as a voltage drop, although it's unloaded, it's not great, but we'll look and see, make sure. So you can see going battery power to the post down here, we have 0.4 of a voltage drop, which is fine. And then we'll do the same thing on the negative post to the case, and we got 0.3 of a voltage drop. So although it's unloaded, there shouldn't be an issue, at least as right now. With an unloaded, we're good. And we'll go negative to our ignitions right here, and you can see we're at 0.5. So we don't have any voltage on this right now. Let me go turn the key on and we'll check this again. Alright, now we should have voltage going from negative over here, and you can see we're at 12.05. A little bit of a voltage drop, but that's fine. It should still work. So we know we got our powers and our grounds, and our wire from the ignition is good. Alright, I'm going to start the car and then we'll see what the voltage is on the battery. You can see the pulley's moving, but that alternator is making a lot of noise. That's a good indication right there we got a bad alternator. And I can smell it too. You can see it's at 13.2, so it's working but not very well. 13.1, it's dropping. Alright, I just put the headlights on high. That should command the computer to give us a full field on this. You can see we're at 12.0, 11.98 with a full load. So this alternator is not putting out like it should. We got a bad alternator. And you can see here with the car on, we got the battery light on right there. 27 millivolt voltage drop. Pretty much a 0 voltage drop on the case. Alright, what I like to do is look at some scan data, see if we have good looking inputs. You can see our ELD voltage is bouncing around, which means it is working, or it should be working. But our battery voltage is at 12, even, and our alternator percentage is 99%. So it should be giving it more of a voltage than it's certainly showing. We'll turn the high beams on like that. You can see our ELD voltage change went up real high, which in turn tells the computer, hey, we need more power at the alternator. And you can see these didn't change, and our battery voltage dropped to 11.6. So I think all our signals are good. It looks like we have a bad alternator. Alright, here's the new alternator. We got the new alternator now. We're going with the Duralast Gold. The gold seems to be decent. There's the part number on this model. This one's made in Taiwan. It is a brand new unit. It's not a remanufactured unit. I'm not a huge fan of reman stuff unless it came straight from Honda. But this is quite a bit cheaper than the Honda unit. And it's not too difficult to replace. So if I do have an issue with this, I can pop this out and get another one from AutoZone pretty easily. If this thing was buried in there, I would go with the Honda unit. So this is what we're going to go with. Alright, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the battery. You're going to lose all your presets on your radio, and if you still have the factory radio, it probably needs a code. Make sure you have the code first, or you're going to not be able to use your radio, and you have to go to the dealer to get the code back. Always disconnect the negative first, then we'll disconnect the positive. Make sure to get them out of the way so they don't touch. Alright, next up we got to get the belt off, or at least off the alternator pulley. And it's a 14 millimeter nut right on the tensioner, the belt tensioner. So you can use a couple different tools. You can see I got a 14 and a 17 linked together to make one long wrench, because you're going to need a long wrench. I have just a 14 really long 14 millimeter wrench, or you can use a serpentine tool like this. So, but you got to use something. Pull that tensioner back a little bit so you can get the belt off. If you want to know how to replace this belt, I did do a video on the same vehicle. As you can see, the belt is loose now. We can leave it right there. Now we just need to take this bolt off, and then there's two bolts. I don't know if you can barely see them, one right by the tip of my finger here and one over here. And then we got this plug here. We'll just go ahead and unplug it if this thing will come off. Sometimes these things are fused on there. They've been on there a while. So we'll unplug that, and then be careful. This is going to be hot right here. All this will be hot if it's been running, but we'll have to loosen that nut right there too. Alright, just going to reach in here with this wrench, crack this 10 millimeter loose. Too loose. Alright, when you spin it off, it helps to have a little magnet here, unless you like to go fishing. Alright, this is the setup I'm using, 3/8, which is a 3" extension and 12 millimeter socket. This one has a flexible handle, just in case I need it. Break these 3 bolts loose. They can be on there kind of tight. just sneak around everything with this setup. There's the second one, and then the third one. There, all three of them are loose. I'm able to do it just with this. One, two, as you can see, they're the same size, so it doesn't matter if you mix these two up. And the one on top is long. Got to manhandle just a little bit, but you can get it out. And just to give myself a little room, I popped the power steering out of its bracket so this hose would move. And then this just kind of sits right in this groove right here. Pop that out to get a little more clearance. And it's always a good idea, match your parts up, make sure they're the same. Much easier if you drop it with the pulley straight down. Just drop it through here and then turn it. More of a pain getting it out, a little bit easier getting it in. Alright, now that we got it set in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this while it's loose and we can get to it, and then we'll set it up into place. Easier to put this on and tighten it up now while it's out of the way, otherwise the manifold here's in the way. Let's get it snug. There's a little notch where the little ring has to go past, so just make sure it's out of the way of that. And now we'll get the long bolt started. Make sure to get them started by hand. Alright, we'll do the other two bolts the same way. Once you get this one in, the other two much easier to line up. You can just kind of do it by feel. There, all three are started. Come on. Alright, now we'll just torque them down. Alright. The little nut on the battery post, or the cable that goes back to the battery, that's only 6 foot-pounds, so don't kill that. Just get it snug. It's going right next to plastic. And then these other 3 12s are going to be 16 foot-pounds. Just be smart about your torque. 16 is not very much. Right there. Look at that, 16 on the dot. Alright, 16, all three. Now, if you ever do this job, you'll notice there's hoses and stuff in the way down there, plus the fan. Now, I was able to get loose this inside bottom bolt with this. And just had to move it a little bit like that, and went at that angle. You can also do it just with a standard, or I'm sorry, a deep socket with no extension. But you might have to go at the other angle like this. And then the other ones you should be able to get to no problem. But in most instances, you're probably going to need a wrench that'll bend a little bit like that. You can get a cheap one at Harbor Freight. They don't cost much. Then this one's pretty easy. It's right there. Alright, we'll plug everything back in. This plug that we moved out of the way on the fan, we'll get that back. Power steering, we'll get this back into place. Like that. Then we'll get our belt on. I'm not going to rehash how to put the belt back on. If you want to see exactly how to take the belt off and put it back on, watch the other video. Alright, go ahead and get our battery back on. This is just a 10mm. I like a 10mm deep to do the batteries. Don't kill them, just get them snug. Just remember, the negative cable is always first one off, last one on. Alright, before I go firing it up, I'm going to give it a once over. Make sure my battery looks good. Make sure I'm plugged back in, my cable's back, and it's got the rubber on there. All 3 bolts are tight. I like to touch them, make sure. Make sure power steering, that's back in place. Now this is popped out. Put that where it belongs. And then I always make sure this belt is around all the pulleys properly all the way down, especially down at the bottom. And make sure we're not leaving anything behind. And one more thing, we'll put a zip tie around this cable. There, that way this cable won't go anywhere, won't rub on anything. Now, with regards to this little clip, you can try to unclip it, reach in there and clip it off, keep it with your cable. Usually These things are, if they're not already broken, they usually break as soon as you touch them when they're this old. It's up to you. I usually just leave it alone. As soon as you move the alternator, it'll snap right off. Can you see that? 14.2, 14.18. And as you can see, battery light is out. This is the serpentine belt set that I used. This Honda uses a 14mm, but this is the kit made by Gear Wrench 3680 Delta. That's the kit I used. And the other tools I used, just this 3/8 inch ratchet from Gear Wrench that bends. I did use a long 10mm wrench to break the nut, break that nut loose. You can use a standard one, standard length 10mm wrench. Just the added length makes it a little easier. I just used a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 10mm for the battery and to tighten that 10mm nut back up. 12mm deep and shallow sockets with an extension, just whatever your preference is. I ended up using both on this, along with my Milwaukee ratchet. Just makes it easier to spin them on and off. And a cup of coffee, don't forget that. And of course I used a torque wrench too. This is a digital one from Snap-on. Costs a lot of money. You don't need one like this, but I would recommend, if you don't know the feel of fasteners, use a torque wrench. And I forgot to mention while I was doing my checks, but if I didn't have battery voltage right here, I would have made sure I had a good connection. And if I was confident that there was a good connection right here, then I would have to go to the 100 amp fuse that's inside this fuse box right here. Should be the number 22 if I remember correctly. Make sure that's good. And then if I didn't have power on this other black with yellow stripe wire right here that comes from your ignition feed, you got to check the under dash fuse box. That will be the number 18 and it's a 15 amp. And I would have checked that to make sure that I had power there before I went further. There you go. That's how I troubleshoot and replace the alternator on these 2.4 Accords. And as always, if the video helped you out or you liked it, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. A little bit of bonus footage for you after the fix. Looking at the data PIDs, you can see batteries at 12.3, ELD is at 4.66, alternators at 29% bouncing out right there, and our alternator controls at 14.5. So let's go ahead and fire it up and see how these change. You can see our battery voltage is up at 3.7, 3.8. Our ELD is bouncing around now, which indicates it's working. Our alternator is at about 30, 32, 27, right in there. Now I'm going to turn the headlights on and see, watch that ELD change. See, I went up to about 28, 29. Now we'll put it on high. High beams are on. Now it went to 39. And we'll turn the blower on high. You can see where that voltage is now, where the ELD is at now. You can see our alternator's up, bouncing between 45 and 50. And I turned the rear defrost on. So now we're pretty much maxed out. You can see we're holding steady at 13.6. ELD is at 68. and our alternator's at 50, anywhere from 50 to 60. And you watch as we shut things down. Now everything's back off. So you can tell the computer's in full control of this.